that's just something like a little psychological trick that I and some of my other clients in sales can practice sometimes. It gets you out of your own, what's best for me, what do I want, and more like, what's best for them, what's best for this situation. Changes your
Yeah.
energy a little bit.
If you were
Yeah.
hosting a party and they were a guest at your party, what do you need to know about them to make the best party for them, right?
Oh, interesting.
What's next for IT? In today's economy, technology touches every aspect of the day-to-day operations of business. There has never been more pressure on IT to deliver for our organizations. So what can we expect over the next decade? We need to think differently about how we approach our work to continue to thrive into the future. This requires all of us to be intentional in how we look at our role going forward. Smart IT is an approach to getting the important things done by transforming the way we think, work, and lead. And now, let's disrupt the status quo, simplify the complex, and reduce risk the smart IT way.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Smart IT Podcast. And I'm excited to get started with a fantastic conversation this afternoon with Katherine and Paula. So, ladies,
Hi.
welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun to be here. I'm glad I made it. As we were joking, I'm still in that holiday little funk, and I knew something was happening that I didn't have on my calendar this afternoon, and so really glad I didn't miss it. Glad to be here, William.
We're glad you didn't miss it too.
Me too, and good to meet you too. I know we're going to get to know each other better today.
Yeah, and my audience should recognize Katherine. She's been on the show a couple of times, and she's helping out with our exploration of the buyer-seller market. So we've discussed before, IT leaders have a very challenging environment, a lot of decisions to make on when they procure technology and use third party for services. It's literally thousands and thousands of options out there. So it's very confusing, very noisy. And so Katherine's been helping me out, trying to figure out ways to construct conversations with interesting people on both sides. One in the marketplace, from everything from managed service providers to value-added resellers to consultants. And then we see how that matches up to what's going on internally with IT leadership teams between CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, et so in my travels recently, I've obviously, I know this audience knows, I've been doing facilitation training and practice and just really enjoying that as a profession. So I came across Paula in my journey of facilitation, and she's a facilitator herself. And then we were just talking recently, and I said, you know what, Paula, this would be a fantastic opportunity to bring you on to kind of have you join in this show. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you today.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to what we're going to unpack here today. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it was perfect timing, right? Because the discussion we actually had was around presenting to a potential buyer on services. So I said, this is something that IT leaders have to deal with all the time. So I'm always interested from the other side of the aisle here, where we're thinking about, if I have a service or product or experience, how do I bring it to market? How do I market it, brand it? How do I sell it? How do I procure it? All these different pieces of the selling experience. So we know from the perspective of most organizations, they are inundated with options on what they need to buy, and they always worry about buying the wrong thing. So I just want to get started here a little bit, actually, Paula, on this, just a little insight. So we were talking about something you did recently where you actually had the CEO in front of you and had the opportunity just to express your value proposition. So I just want to start there in a few minutes and talk about, what does that feel like when you finally get through all the way to the end, and what you offer to the market, you get a chance to be in front of the CEO, who is technically, I guess, the last person potentially to maybe sign off on it. So let's start there.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I love this conversation about thinking about the buyer and the seller, because we all have our needs and agendas, right? Things that we're trying to accomplish with that conversation. Because what is it when I'm a seller trying to sell in to an organization with a service? It's essentially a conversation, a proposition, a negotiation. And so my background is in consumer market research. I've been doing that for a very long time. I'm a qualitative researcher by trade and expertise, and that brought me into facilitation, which allowed me to expand my services and really just how I look at the world. And one thing that I think about all the time when I'm in front of senior leaders trying to talk to them about my services is really, you kind of have to take a step back, right? You need to really deeply understand what is the problem that they are trying to solve before you get into all the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of how. I think it's important to spend as much time as you possibly can on the what and the why. Like how is this going to help your organization make money, right? I mean, most of the organizations we're selling to are in order for them to turn a profit or, somehow better themselves financially mostly. So as the more we can understand about their business and what exactly your service is going to do to help them, the better for both sides.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because sometimes the buyer think they know exactly what they want. So maybe they'll do their own research and then they go to the marketplace, then they go get their bids, they shrink that list down to a handful of potential candidates and then try to make that some type of evaluation. But that's a very, very long process. And I think one of the things we're getting at is what happens when the buyer isn't aware of a different way of approaching their problem. Right. And that gives opportunity for the seller to kind of do an education there. So let's talk about this. Hey, I've heard what you told me, but maybe there's an opportunity here to do some education.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I mean, that happens often in my world where, this kind of goes back to that idea of sometimes we talk about the method or the way we're going to do something before we better understand what it is we actually need and who it's going to benefit. And so I think sometimes we just need to slow the whole thing down. But like you said, oftentimes internal teams are doing a lot of their own work to figure out the best solutions, and they may get ahead and say, this is how we want to do it. And then they'll put a request out for a proposal, right? So sometimes we're reacting as service providers. And I guess my wish would be that in that process, there's a little bit of space for, maybe the buyer side has already come up with various solutions and now they're bidding, asking for requests for proposals on how to create that solution. And I think it's beneficial in the process to just leave at least a little bit of space to have more conversation about why they think that's the solution. What do you think? What do you think,
Yeah, this is
Katherine?
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know me and Katherine talk about this a lot here because I'm
Okay.
trying to figure out if 4 or 5 different providers can do the same thing, how do you stand out? The least get
Yes.
get the awareness that you're your option, and then 2 to get that extra space to actually have that discussion. I know,
Yeah.
Katherine, you see us quite a bit when you companies that you work for, trying to get that mind share and say, can we get some time just to come in and have a discussion? But first, how do I let people know that I'm not just an option? I'm someone to actually talk and listen and potentially find a better solution for you.
Yeah. I think one of the ways to do that is I know we're all in such a hurry all the time. But to just take a pause and ask a question, ask a better question, ask a more generative question, right? To see if we can dig in, uh, get behind the reason why they think they need a certain solution. May not always be possible, but I think as leaders and as strategic partners, right? Like we're
Yeah.
trying to move from tactical to more relationship building. And it's not always possible to do that right away, especially if you're just being asked um, to respond to an RFP or yeah, an RFP of some sort. So it really depends on what type of relationship you have with your provider, or the buyer or potential buyer.
And Katherine, I know
Yeah.
we talk about this too. How do you stand out? So your potential buyer look at you as somebody more than just transacting, but they'll give you that time to actually slow down a little bit to have a further discussion.
Yeah, because I think we've brought up so many different scenarios, which is so interesting. Like the request for a proposal. Well, at least you're in the top consideration. Like they like you enough. I mean, unless they're asking everybody in the business, which I doubt. You've made it so far. But then, like you said, if you're just handing over papers, everyone's doing it. How do you stand out? Or like in the
Yeah.
situation you brought up, William, then you have the ones like, can I just get a meeting? This person would throw away a proposal. We're not that far. I'm just trying to get them to like know who I am. And so in each situation, you're going to handle it differently. But you bring up such a good point about relationships. Sometimes you're in just because they already like you, trust you, they have experience with you. But if they don't know who you are, they don't know who your brand is. Sometimes you can get in the door because you work with such a great brand. Like it's always going to be in the top 3 considerations. But you don't always have that luxury. You're working for a startup. No one knows who you are. What are you going to do to stand out, to get those meetings, get people to look at your product set? So I think there's a lot of questions. I think every situation has a slightly different answer, but if you bucket them into where we are in that journey and asking those questions, right? So I'm on the marketing side. We're talking sales side right now, but there are those different goalposts you have to make, right? From they don't know me from Adam to, okay, there's just 3 of us left. They're going to choose one of us.
Right.
How do we stand out? And know what's important to them. And
it could almost be like part of the marketing effort of your brand. So maybe your brand in those different situations, it's similar, right? So the brand one for them to find you in the first place.
Yeah.
And then your brand on the second thing, when you show up, right? So when you're a finalist, one among 3, maybe your brand is being reinforced in how you're presenting the information, how you're restating potentially what the current state is. And then getting into that education to do a little bit of challenge, right? So you've seen this from everybody else and just cut them off, right? I know you got to have cost considerations and I may come in higher, but let's set the table up front before you can get to like cutting me off after we get off the meeting. And then I lose because I might be a little bit higher than somebody else. So it's almost like that. You got to establish a brand that we educate and really get down to that underlying business pain, right? We're solving that pain in a way that's maybe unique, different. So when you hear, oh, I never heard of that before, that approach, that could be a good opportunity, right? So Paul, I know we mentioned that too, right? Because I think you had that situation too, where they didn't know the approach you were bringing to the table. And maybe that's part of your brand right there.
Well, that's exactly what happened. We were found through great marketing, SEO, in our local area. So that's fabulous, right? But then, and being invited to have the conversation about how to solve their problem. And one of the parts of the solution that we suggested was different than anyone else. And thankfully they told us that, right? Like we didn't even necessarily know that that's why we were invited. So that was great. I was like, ooh, that's distinctive. That kind of puts us, makes us stand out, which is great. And then that's education, right? Because what they saw from us was provocative, and they had lots of questions about that. So then that gave us the platform to do some education about why we thought that solution was better than potentially other solutions, which I had a guess about that other people may have proposed. And then, in the moment, right, there's like okay, that's cool. They found us. Now our proposal's a little different, provocative, interesting, intriguing. And then in the moment, how do you sell that specific thing? Because I did not know at the time that what we had proposed was different. And so, but thankfully, I mean, I'm very invested in what I thought the solution should be. And still, I needed to, come up with a great story, and that part didn't go quite as well. But now I got it locked down, right?
Right.
Because I know, Katherine, you're really you're big on storytelling, so it's interesting to think about like how you can prepare yourself to be a better storyteller in, pre-meeting, during the meeting, and even post-meeting, because even
Right.
though I didn't come up with like all of my, I wasn't thinking on my feet as much as I possibly could have been in the meeting, but thankfully I had enough experience and reference and resource where I could go back and say, well, hey, here are some examples of why we, some more examples of why
Yeah.
we think this solution is the best. So
It can be really tricky in person too, because you can have them ready in your minds. Like, I know the stories. I know our other customer success stories, or maybe they're not even our clients, but people out there have tried something similar. But you never know how the script is going to go in person. So you got to have them ready, that confidence, taking the opportunity. If you think that story is going to help in that moment, having that library and ready to pull them out. I mean,
yeah. And then depending on the
pieces.
type of client or like what the situation is. I mean, I've got plenty of stories, but I may not always have the exact story at the exact right time in that moment, thinking on your feet. Even if, I mean, I consider myself to be quite a confident person, but and maybe that's another part of the conversation, right? Is just like having your own mindset and confidence going into those conversations. And some of it is being prepared, of course. But anyway, so yeah, you're not always going to have every story for every situation, but hopefully you have enough of them to be able to kind of like pick and choose and put something together if you need to on the spot.
Or what I called build a story. Build a story with
Okay.
them. How would you like to see this go? So going back, and you're just so smart to the questionnaire. I can see it'd be really interesting to be the fly on the wall when you're in these rooms, Paula, because you learn so much from them, and you might not know what they're thinking or what they're struggling with. You go in assuming because this is what your product or solution or service does,
Or
and you
the
find out
RFP
more.
was about, right? Like,
Right.
so we have a lot of ingoing assumptions about what we think the problem is. Well, I will tell
Yeah.
you in this particular meeting, they brought up something, thankfully, due to some questions that we asked. And that was like a little blip on the RFP, you know?
Right.
Anyway,
That's so
sorry, go
hard to
ahead.
do, but when you're are in those meetings, and it sounds like you did this, and you're asking questions and you start hearing what they want, what you can do, you kind of are building a story together. You're building a use case together. And what's so interesting is, even though it doesn't feel like a story in the moment, your brain is following a lot of the same thought process, right? There's a problem, a journey, we're meeting our goals, like they're going through that. That exercise can actually make them feel the confidence of having the experience of having gone through the process with you already.
Yes. Oh
Right?
my,
Isn't that
and
so interesting?
I think about that all the time. Like if I'm having a conversation with someone like that, a leader who is the decision maker, really, or anyone, but in this case, the decision maker, I'm thinking, how can I show them the experience of what it's like to work with me as if they were a participant in my research or my facilitated workshop or what have you, right? Like I don't, it, on some level, I'm doing that unconsciously. And then there are some moments where I'm doing that very consciously. Yeah.
It's interesting. The
It's
psychology of
fun.
it's
It's
it
actually
is
really
so
fun.
fun. It is. Our
Yeah.
nerds just awakened. The inner
Yes.
nerds.
It's super fun.
And it's like there's
Okay.
opportunities here because you have the decision maker in front of you. However, when that person goes back to their team, it's always going to be a team of other people who can say yes or no. What are your thoughts? What do you think about proposal 4 versus proposal 3? So we can use that storytelling up front to start bringing in, okay, what does this look like on day 1 after we won the deal? We start to partner up. I'm working with finance or HR or IT or project managers. How does that look? What does a day in life look like? And you take them on that journey of this is what we do. So my other customers, we've started this, we exchanged value after this win, and we got to the goals. We met the needs. We were on time, and it's a great partnership to work with each other. So when we get to that inevitable, hey, you're higher. Maybe you're higher for a reason. I think the decision maker wants to be comfortable that him or herself and their teams are going to work with you very well. It's going to be on time and they're going to be successful. So let's talk about some of the things from the buyer, what they're thinking about in their mind of their personal reputation on the line. If they like pick the wrong provider or the wrong technology, and then they want to look good in front of their other bosses and colleagues. And let's kind of talk about that a little bit.
Okay, I actually have something to say on this. This is and I feel like I just interrupted you. But
You're
I was
good.
thinking about this with somebody because we've seen it happen where, and I have clients that range from, they're always in the top 3 considerations to they're a startup and who knows who they are. So I've seen this happen in a range of situations. But this one company, and they weren't even a startup, like they're known and they do have third party researchers test them. They do the Gartner, the Force, all this. And even though they look really good from the third party testers and there's all this data that says they're one of the best, right? They had trouble selling and they were noticing it was not that people didn't agree they weren't one of the best, but they were so comfortable. It's like what they were using was good enough and the pain of having to change. Because we know in IT, things are very rarely simple. If you're switching out even just one technology, one application, it can be tricky depending on what it is. And so a lot of times they just didn't even want to, it wasn't compelling enough to go through the pain of change.
For them to
really
sell differently. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. And so they were like, well, it's not enough because the facts say we're one of the best. So you think people would, with their next refresh, want to switch over, but it was still going to be a hassle enough. So they had to use other methods they're doing fine now. It's going to be an interesting case study, but it wasn't just the facts of we're the best that was getting them in the door because of the pain. How do you overcome that pain of change if they have to change to work with you?
Oh, right. Because internally, they have to do all kinds of heavy lifting, right, in their systems and processes and maybe people, right? It's like a huge, big systems change. Yeah. So it just takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of work and effort and energy to do that. So I would imagine you would have to do a better selling job to get people to make that kind of change. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Another opportunity potentially. So if someone actually, if you follow their brand reputation and their website and they've been around for a long period of time, they have the best, brightest minds in theory or in practicality, that should mean they should be able to translate that to making it easier on the buyer. I mean, they should be able to anticipate. So how do you communicate that? One, you have the experience, not just because we said it, but in some of the anticipated challenges that you're going to have on your side. We know you're going to have some pushback from certain teams who are resistant to change. We've accounted for this. We know you're going to have trouble tracking the progress of this project. Maybe it's going to take 6 months. We've experienced that. This is how we address that. So let's talk about the opportunity to really delve in. I think a lot of times the seller has the expertise. They go in, they throw bodies at the problem, they come out, but sometimes they don't bring all the experience and know-how together to make it the experience itself easier for the buyer, where they feel like some of the things I know I'm going to run into, you've already thought about it, you built it in, and I'm going to be able to experience it and see it, that I feel more comfortable that 6 months from now, you guys not hassling me with project updates and delays and, talk about how there's opportunity on the buyer side to make the experience even easier for these decision makers.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as a service provider, this is where asking a lot of great questions comes in, and applying a lot of empathy, right? Like if you were to try to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer and then internally what they have to go through, if you can anticipate some of those things, I mean, it's kind of like an internal customer journey, right? What are some of the things that the people internally are going to be dealing with if you buy my service? If you can anticipate that and document it and show that you understand and you've heard them, and kind of collaborate and co-create on what that looks like. I mean, I think we have to do that. We have to do that these days to show our impact and provide value as partners and not as just tactical order takers, which in my industry can happen quite a bit. And I imagine in any industry, especially if you're kind of new or you're learning, right, it's easy to do that. So I think it's important to just show empathy for the people who are buying the service.
Tagging off that, if you are asking those questions, a little action item for everyone listening is, you have a library and as a salesperson or in the position you were in, you do get to ask a lot of questions and you document them. And if you notice, okay, with these target audiences, these are the type of problems, the conversations they're having. Okay, so now we can let our other sales reps know, ask them about this, see what they share back and address those potential challenges and how you're going to help them. But it can also be in your marketing content. Hey, we know that every time we talk with this type of buyer, they may really want it, but they know they're going to run into this problem with XYZ department. Okay, well, let's make a video and maybe it's a reenactment, a story-driven way that we're showing these different problems and how we're helping through them all. Like make it fun, make it serious, make it what you want, but you can show that in your marketing content and not just through email or your video calls with them. You can show it throughout. So using that that intel in many different situations in your marketing sales journey.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry to interrupt. So that brings up for me something that we learn, William, in facilitation, and I think about a lot in my coaching and really in research too, which is what is the emotion that people are coming in with? Like, how do they feel right now? Like, right as they're anticipating a big purchase, maybe it's a big investment of some sort and all these systematic changes, how are they feeling? They're probably feeling anxious, nervous, maybe a little excited, right? So if there are ways that you and your service can help them to feel something better, right? More at ease, more calm. So those kinds of things, like what is the beginning point and the end point of when you come in with your service? How are you bridging that gap between where they are now emotionally and where they could be with your service?
Well, I love your idea of the customer journey, and I love customer journey maps. So that's be a very fascinating way for the upfront sales process to start to leverage that more. So you can actually showcase all these different points you've been thinking about, right? So it's, all the legwork, the back end has to happen on the buyer side, right? They have to go make the business case. They got to do a PowerPoint deck. They got to crunch some numbers. So if you've been in the field for a long period of time, maybe you start to take some of these pieces, map it out, visualize on the journey map, and start to map in ways you can help out with each one of these things. So you go with us. Here's the ROI calculator that we use. Here are the different organizational changes that might impact you. Here's the way you might present this to different audiences. So maybe up front where you're providing more, a bigger picture of what this experience looked like if you say yes, as opposed to it's a separate part of the organization. So I know from your standpoint in consulting, you probably see this a lot, right? Because their internal team saying, hey, why should we hire Paula company? We can internally do it ourselves. And if you anticipate that, you already know, I understand you guys are very smart, but here's your time constraints. You got your plates full. Let's visualize this. Let's talk about it. And this is why you might want to go with somebody like me and my company.
Right. Because we are helping alleviate some pain for them. And sometimes the pain is time, right? Or it could be money, it could be time, effort. I don't have the team to help me. So I'm often kind of an outsourced consumer insights person. Or so it can show up in many different kinds of ways and how I help. And also I think about like the investment that they need to make using my service or a service, and what can you do to help them with kind of sell you into the company, right? You need to help them create the story for how they're going to go and talk to all the influencers, and some of whom are actually signing on the dotted line to use your service. So what can you do as part of the sales process and in your storytelling that can help them? Basically you're helping put words in their mouth to make it easier.
I just love that point so much. It's so true because it's so much work for them internally, and kind of the politics, you could say the corporate politics of getting a sale, right? Because maybe politics isn't the right word, but they are having to go to all these people and kind of champion something. They've won it. Finally. Okay, now let's go to all these other people. Let's get the meeting set up. So I think that was just beautifully said, and I couldn't agree more. As when you can help them tell the stories and kind of streamline those conversations and taking the weight off of that. And they can tweak it if they want, but it's kind of like they have something to start from that you've helped them with. It says a lot.
And get that reputation known around town that when you work with them, they take 60 to 70% of the workload off of you. And they're upfront, right? So maybe we should just be more upfront. Like I know after this call, you have 2 more people to talk to. We know you got to go back and forth with costs. So let's be more transparent with the costing model. I think one of the frustrations with buyers is they're not exactly sure. When you're talking about the outcome, it seems like I got it, but then I mention another problem or pain point, and then you mention the add-on. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, was that included or not included? So it happens both on the technology and on the services sometimes. It's not exactly what am I getting. So when I compare you to 2 or 3 other bidders, I'm not exactly sure you told me exactly how much more I might have to pay to be on par with somebody else. Or this is why they're they're cheaper than you by 50%. That's because they're only going to take you half the way. You want to get the other half, this is what the cost. So let's talk about this, seeing that number, whatever that number is, and what exactly that's doing for them.
Well, this happens in my world as well. It's kind of like it's looking at the numbers as a comparison. I mean, that's really easy, right? Right? Like, look at this number versus that one. But what you really want to understand is what are you getting for that amount of money and what is the investment you want to make? I mean, I think there's the reality of, budgets and how much you can or are willing to spend, or make decisions about like, okay, I'm going to spend more over here, but that means I'm going to have to spend a little less over there. But when buyers are making decisions, I ask, well, make sure you understand the value of what you're getting, right? Because sure, there are other people that could do what you're doing, but how do they deliver it? are you going to like working with that person?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Are they going to ask you the right questions? Are they really going to be able to brainstorm in the way you need to, or collaborate? Or so there's so many ways that we can put value on a proposal, a relationship like that. So yeah, I like to think of impact and value.
I was just going to say, you both bring up such good points. I look at a lot of contracts, and not just
Mhm.
necessarily for IT, but I contract a lot of other agencies and creatives, and you just name it. Like I write a lot of contracts and I put out a lot of contracts, and you would think something like videography services for that, or website, or sometimes, firewalls for this, like you said, we'll change it even to IT. It would be apples to apples, but even how their contracts are lined up can be different, right? And you're saying like apples to oranges, what services are you getting along with these products and such? If you can make your proposal super clean and, like William said, being super transparent about what things are, you're already making their life so easier, because they're already having to take those 3 proposals, those 3 bids, and kind of map out, to your point, like, what am I really getting here? And how does that stack
Yeah.
up to everyone else? Because everyone does their proposals usually so different. I mean, they might have some numbers and some light items, but
Well, have
it
you
can
ever
be
seen, I know
difficult.
that I've been a part of a couple of different processes like this, where the buyer sends out essentially a template for
Yeah.
that everybody has to adhere to. And oh my gosh, as a supplier, I always find that to be kind of challenging, because I mean, I'm a fan of value-based pricing. So it's not always like line item to line item to line
Mhm.
item, but yet
Yep.
I understand why, like, it's easier on the buying side to
Yeah.
kind of get a better sense of what they're actually getting. Um, and then I guess it's up to us to demonstrate, talk about that value, if if we are different, have different pricing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's such an interesting, it's such
Yeah.
an
You know
interesting
what?
game, isn't it?
It's like a defense. Yeah.
Negotiation.
Yeah. It's like a defense mechanism on the buyer side. It's just, sometimes they'll even do a request for information first before they get
Yes.
to the request for a proposal. And you start to realize they're collecting a lot of data from a lot of different firms out there to help them with their decision-making process, or how they can formulate the exact requirements. And you start to realize, hold it, this is interesting. They're asking for a lot of information from us, and we're
Yeah.
one of many. And then eventually go through the process from RFI to RFP. And then they kind of whittle it down. You realize, I think you guys are spending a lot of time trying to get this information that potentially you could have paid one person, one firm up front to collect that, get the right requirements, and then help you with the actual service or
Mm.
technology implementation. So I think the buyer needs to see more options and see and be able to consume that options better and faster. At the end of the day, a lot of times we're trying to filter out the noise. So it's too many different people bidding for it. So that's what that whole RP process is in there. And then the whole, we got to do a cost comparison. And can we get points knocked off to be in line with cost cutting across the company? So a lot of things are being done on the buyer side, I think, in reaction to how difficult it is to buy from the market. So I think it really is kind of an open space for the actual producer, the seller, to actually be more innovative. I mean, from end
Mm.
to end, because you could have like differentiation and like actual deliverables that's so different that you're the only one that can provide it the entire solution that particular way. So you really compare that to your competitors, they might not be able to match it. They may gloss over it in their proposal. It's like, no, that's going to be more difficult than you think. Do you have the right contracts, or the right process, or the right technology? And all of a sudden, you're starting to get into the differentiation, but you need to get to that process right there. So it's kind of like your in the end has to be from your brand, your marketing, to your sale, to the actual service itself. You don't want to get all the way to the end to find out the service is just okay. And then you get a brand hit, right? And now they're going to start talking to their friends like, oh man, that firm oversold what they could do. So you got to be locked.
Mhm.
So I think that's why people get caught in the trap of it's just a website problem. or the color schemes or something. No, it's like, what do you actually deliver? What do they say when you leave the room after you finish? They said, man, that was fantastic. I will be a happy reference for that firm. That's really what you want to hear.
I love that question of what do you want them to say when you leave the room? It's a really powerful question. Yeah.
You want them to say like, woof, this process is going to be much easier. I don't have to do that extra work now when I go for that board presentation. Because they gave me the template and they filled out half the information for me. That can be pretty powerful.
Yeah. Think about it. It's a lot of work to get there, right? Like to be that supplier that can be that questioning and innovative and value driven and make sure you make a big impact. And it takes time and effort and work to be that kind of supplier. And hopefully your listeners are all the type who are going to roll up their sleeves and do all that.
Well, here's the good news.
I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead again, Katherine.
Well, I was just going to say it is so much work. And so there are times you obviously have to be strategic in who you do that for. Right? Like, are they getting back to me? Like, are we a team in doing this? Because I could spend hours putting this together, and sure, I might have some other stuff we could reuse from similar situations, but obviously we could all be unpaid consultants getting together this information, nothing come through. So you do have to feel out what the buyer's going through. Also, people saying they want certain services and all this all the time, and they actually have internal stuff going on. You'll notice they kind of back up when you ask them certain questions and they kind of freeze up and you won't hear for a while. It's usually something internal is going on. They never end up buying that tech or filling that position, right? So you do have to use a little bit of intuition and kind of feeling out. And then for those people that are working with you, do it for them. They'll feel the ease of working with you and getting that help and smooth sailing through all their discussions they have to have.
I do have a radical question for both of you. So somebody posted a question online about price and cost transparency. And someone said one of the biggest, they did a survey of buyers, and one of the biggest complaints was the lack of transparency. So the writer of the article suggested something like, hey, why don't we just post our pricing online? As opposed to you have to go through a long process, you have to have a number of meetings, you got to talk, you got to do demos, you got to do this, references, all this before they will actually show you the number. And sometimes the buyer just want to know, what does it cost? Then once I know what it is, then I might engage you. So do you have any thoughts on this whole idea of price transparency, letting them know up front what that is without having to go through a longer process?
You want me to go first?
I'll go first.
I've thought about this a lot. I have thought about this a lot. And some stuff really is like, this saying you can judge apples to apples, apples to oranges is harder. I think you should be as transparent as possible. A lot of times, like when people are asking for my services, I have to give a price range because there are things that will change the exact cost depending on your needs. So even something as simple as a presentation, I can give you a starting price or a ballpark range for the companies that are trying to do what you're trying to do with this presentation have gone through. Same size, it'll have the same approval process. There are nuances, but you should at least be able to give a ballpark range or a starting price or have something, because no one wants to, I totally agree with this. No one wants to go through that many conversations to find out, even if they wanted you, that we couldn't afford you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you have to have something that people can start with to know it's even, and that saves your time too as a seller.
I wonder if it goes both ways too, because fair enough. I know, like, I've got kind of special rates for some people. And I like my reasons for why I do that. And then there's just like my regular rate. And I've got basically, I kind of do things in packages. Right. It's very different. It depends on what your business is and what your business model is and who you're selling to. Right. So there's no like magic bullet here, because there's no, depending on your business, it might be perfectly normal and a really good idea to have your pricing on your website. For me, I the conversation is so important that I really understand deeply enough what they're trying to accomplish, because sometimes, like you said earlier, William, what they're telling me is their problem. I find out later that that's not really what the problem is, or maybe there are a couple things they want to explore. So, and I do need to know as much of that as possible so that I am then delivering the right solutions, you know? So I'm not opposed to telling people like ballpark pricing at all. Um, and it's great when that buyer also can say, here's approximately what were our expectations, right? If they
Exactly.
can give
Yes.
me anything, like
Hmm.
what is the range that we're looking at? Because then that helps me too, right? Everyone has their parameters and their constraints and their guardrails. So I'll give you, yes, I'm happy to, get you something as quickly as possible. Give me a little something to go on, and then I can help create that in a way
And
that
I
you need it. Yeah.
absolutely, and I agree with that. The transparency on both sides, because sometimes they might not know their budget. They might have to go request, like that's being safeguarded from them too. But they can say, I think it's going to be around in this. But if you're both being transparent, that just helps the relationship too. If someone
Yeah.
comes to me and this, trying to play on empathy here, and I'm blessed that I get to be a buyer, but also a seller. So I get to see both sides. But if someone just comes up and says, well, what's your budget? Instead of saying, well, generally, I already kind of don't trust you. I already kind of think you're
Yeah.
going to try to sell me for as much as you can get. Cause I've had vendors do that before where I told them one budget and they misunderstood. They came back. It was supposed to be for like 4 pieces of content. They came back and said that miraculously what my budget was enough to get 1 piece of content. And I said,
Yes.
Yeah.
oh no, it's supposed to be for 4 pieces of content. And they said, oh no, well, we can work something else. I said, no, thank you. And they came highly
Uh-huh.
recommended, but see, that automatically made me not trust them. Miraculously, it fit right in my budget, but only for 1 piece of content. Now I don't know. So
Mm.
I
Well,
think building
trust
the
is so
trust there.
important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what you're saying reminds me of something else that came up about that. Well, maybe rather than needing to know what their exact budget is, because I actually don't think that, I mean, that is something we would need to know. It's great to know, that's really helpful, but there might be a better question. And the
Yeah.
question is more like, hey, listen, based on what you've told us, here are all your needs. Um, does this range sound reasonable to you? Like, is this what you were thinking? And then you can kind of move from there, right? So you're not saying what's your budget,
Yeah.
but
I
you're
love that.
you're
Mm-hmm.
you're reacting with empathy to, hey, okay, this is what I heard. Does this sound like something you can take on in this
And it's
ballpark?
so non-intrusive too. Like, what's your budget? Sounds a little nosy, but like, does this sound
Yeah.
good? Like the way you said it, it sounds so much just less intrusive, more like just inviting versus pushy. I
Yeah.
like it.
Well, it's a
Yeah.
conversation, right? Like I kind of need to know. That would be helpful for me as I develop
Yeah.
this thing. So, yeah,
Follow
that's
on
that's a good
question.
question. Yeah.
Yes. How about when you're about to do the presentation or the pitch? Now, most buyers love the pitch, and a lot of times they love the pitch. And then it's 45, 50 minutes in, and they're waiting for that last slide. And the last slide is going to be the number. Have any of you ever tried switching it and putting the number on slide 1 first, and then spending the rest of the time, the rest of the 50, 55 minutes of the meeting, justifying or talking through how do we get to that number?
I have not done that. That's very intriguing. That's a good experiment. Yeah. I mean, because I know so I was in corporate for a while too. One of my jobs was I literally would have to take like the stack of papers that my director would get. And because we got so many not requests for proposals, but like merchandise material to go through from various suppliers and stuff. And it was my job to come to her and say, hey, I think we should explore working with these people or those people. And 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 I know that when we would get proposals, oftentimes, like my boss would just be, and I've done this too, you kind of go to the last page, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is it?
Yep.
What are we talking about? What is that number? So I know that happens a lot. I think that would be an interesting experiment to see, yeah, because oftentimes for me, I send in a number, I don't present a number.
That's me. That's me too.
Yeah.
Because usually some questions and answers and just discussions exchanged. And then they ask, so when could we get a number from you? And I'll give them like, okay, with that information, now I'm going to go do this, get these numbers for, and so it can be a few days to a week, depending on all the moving parts that need to be finalized for that final number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm always happy, man. That demo going so well, or that new car looks good, or that new house you're walking through, and it's nice. And then they took you around and saw all the nice features and getting all excited. And then you go to that ultimate moment where you have to ask that question.
Mhm.
How much? If I knew up front $1 million house, okay, I'm gonna bypass that one. I'm gonna go down to like a different type. So it's an interesting dynamic of how much information, where do you provide it? Because seems to be the numbers seem the most dominant feature. But getting back to kind of like where we started about this, really helping make sure they got the right problem defined, all the different stakeholders involved to really come up to it. Is this just one budget bucket they're pulling from, or is this an organizational challenge that maybe it's 3 or 4 different budgets and buckets, and all of a sudden they can definitely afford it? So I almost feel like by default, you're coming up to a point where they internally decided, here's the bucket. And if they don't sell it well internally and don't have assistance potentially, it says $250,000, but it could be a $1 million organizational wide problem that they can't really see. And they actually need to hire you, Paula, to help come out and figure out it's $1 million. So it's kind of like, how do you get in there to make sure everybody's in a room? How do you facilitate that conversation? Facilitate all the stakeholders say, this is $1 million problem. So when you see the pricing, it's going to reflect $1 million problem.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had more opportunity to, and I do take this on as a strategic partner. Like, if there is a way that I can help my clients facilitate those conversations internally, I am all about it, because I know they have stakeholders, right? They have different types of decision makers and influencers in the company. So if that, I mean, that is certainly something that is worth spending some time on, like facilitating those conversations internally to better understand who all needs and will be benefited by this service. Because oftentimes, like, if they're larger studies or smaller companies with, where some research will have some impact, I mean, you could be talking to product development people and operations and, all kinds of different people within the company, and certainly want to make sure that if the problem we're solving is impacting them, that we want to make sure they're heard.
Fantastic. I love this. Like there's a lot of opportunities, especially for larger corporations out there who have multiple departments, millions of dollars in budget, and they still have the same challenge of the smaller companies as well. So it's not like unique to the size of the company or if it's services versus tech. It's a ever challenging problem space to figure out how do we reduce the amount of time for people to find the right solution, and how do we get started to win the business and actually get going. At the end of the day, for the IT leaders, they need that whole process to be faster and less painful. So this has been fantastic conversation. Is there anything you guys want to kind of wrap up with? Any parting thoughts?
Guess I would just say, on both sides, on the buyer side and the seller side, if we can do more listening and more asking of questions to better understand the problems that we're solving, the actual problems, and that it takes a little bit of digging maybe to get there, and hopefully you'll find those buyers that you can work with that are open to having more transparent conversations about what they really need and kind of their own parameters, and go out there and sell some stuff, because ultimately what we're helping them do, the buyers do, is no matter what their role, they're in their organization to make money, right? So how can we help them with our service to make money?
Nice. How about you, Katherine?
We've covered a lot today, and it can sound overwhelming because it is. I mean, you're trying to active listen and figure out how you can help them talk to different stakeholders. And I mean, you can sit here listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, and I have, 10, 20, 30 targets, this quarter. Something that sometimes helps me, especially if I'm really excited about a company, is, and you want it so bad, if you want something really bad, you can come off kind of needy, right? And a little intense. It's just mentally just tell yourself, they're just my friend. I'm just asking them what's going on. That helps you with the empathy, and that helps you not come off overly thirsty. Some call it thirsty, needy, hungry, and less about your agenda and more about what they might really need, because they're your friend. That's how you treat your friends, right? Hopefully. If you don't, maybe check yourself. Goals for 2025. But that's just something like a little psychological trick that I and some of my other clients in sales can practice sometimes. It gets you out of your own, what's best for me, what do I want, and more like, what's best for them, what's best for this situation. Changes your energy a little bit.
If you were hosting a party and they were a guest at your party, what do you need to know about them to make the best party for them, right?
Oh, interesting.
It's a really good prompt right there. Yeah.
Very nice. And Katherine, by the way, little tease. So if Tom Hathigan was at that party, how might a seller interact with him? And Paula doesn't know who Tom Hathigan is. We'll offline let you know something we're working on to help facilitate these conversations even further.
Yeah.
But I think for right now, this is a great spot to close out. I really enjoyed both of you joining me for this conversation. It's a big topic, and IT leaders are looking for ways to help ease some of the pain of going out there and acquiring the services and technology they need. So I really appreciate your time today.
This has been fun. Thank you. And really great meeting you. I'm going to have to connect with you more because I love your knowledge set and your experience. This is great to be connected. So thank you, Willem, for connecting us and all our listeners.
Appreciate it very much. I will gladly connect with you about storytelling as well. I love that.
So fun.
So thanks, William. Thanks for creating this space for us today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. That's been another episode of the Smart IT Podcast. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for joining another episode of the Smart IT Podcast, where we explore what's next for IT and disrupt the status quo, simplify the complex, and reduce risk together. If you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, and leave your comments. And for more Smart IT wisdom, check out my website at williamreed.info.